Now, something that came up recently in a new client call actually created this next question for you. How are we able to even create a case plan without reviewing the documentation from the client?
Yeah. So I think this is it's one of those questions that like wouldn't have occurred to me until a client asked it because
Mm-mm.
it's like, oh, well, we just do this. We do it all the time.
Right.
But I thought about it and I think kind of the main reason it works is that basically every case that we work, as diverse as they all are, which we've talked about multiple times, can be viewed through just like a couple of frameworks. And we use that word all the time. But one is the what happened versus what should have happened. That's a question that we apply to almost every case. And something that's like similar, sometimes the same thing, sometimes it's not, is where did money come from and where did it go? And as long as you can look at a case in one of those two ways, like they're kind of all the same.
Yeah.
The data sets that you're going to be looking at to answer those questions are going to be different for different cases, but essentially every client concern boils down to one or both of those questions. And so I think that's really the answer. We're just applying the same framework to every case. And as long as the client is upfront with us about, their processes and the information that's available and what their concerns are, which they are, um, we can always put it into a investigation plan that we're going to work.
And this is an ongoing process. We don't just set the case plan and then say, this is what we're going to do for you. Like, this is iterative, collaborative with the client.
Yes. Yeah. That's not to say that we just write a case plan and they sign it and it never evolves and concerns never get dropped or added because they do all the time. And so I guess that's important for the client to know too. Like, you're going to approve this, we're going to start working on it. But as we go, you might uncover more things. We might uncover things that, or we might find out that, you thought you had this data available, but really it's not available. And so we can't really address this concern. We definitely adjust as we go along.
And I've noticed lately in several of our case planning workshops, we've kind of started saying, like, okay, we would want to do this kind of analysis, but based on what we get there, we kind of need to make this to be determined analysis because we know there might be another step where we need to circle back up again and do a second workshop, which seems most common when our client has very little control. That seems to be like kind of the indicator right now. That could change, but we've been kind of having to add that little TBD to our
Yeah.
case plan.
Which normally I would hate because I just feel like that's not my personality, but I kind of like it because it's just embracing reality and it feels better to do it up front than to think like, here's our case plan, go. And then we're working it. And then I realize, like these two data sets like do not reconcile and we actually did expect them to, or, the results of this analysis were like not even close to what we thought it was going to be. So that totally affects what we were going to do next. It's kind of nice to like build that in and know we're probably going to have to regroup, after we do items 1 and 2 to kind of decide how we want to go with item 3. Yeah, that's definitely,
Absolutely.
I like that we've started doing that. We didn't really talk about it. We just started doing it.
Hmm. Yeah. And then I wanted to just take a minute before we talk about an example, but I wanted to just take a minute on the sole proprietor issue or like a single investigator, by yourself. Because I was that for several years. Actually, I take that back. I wasn't. There was a period of time that I did not have employees, and maybe like 1 year. And I started thinking, well, how did I plan for these cases when I was just by myself? And there's just no way you can know everything about everything, right? Like in these workshops, it's so great because someone has their, depending on their experience, like now we have Justin on the team and he's very fresh out of audit and he'll say, well, what if we looked at it this way? And I'm like, oh, we haven't considered looking at this way in a while. And then we have this discussion. So that's just so valuable. So I thought about what did I do as a sole proprietor and working cases by myself that I would get to where I felt like, okay, I've got a comprehensive case plan for a client without that team setting. And I think I just created pseudo teams. So I would think to myself, okay, this is what the client needs me to address. This is what I want to do. This is the information I need. I mean, everything that we've talked about. But then if I had a concern that I just wasn't familiar with, I would reach out to somebody. And then I would tell them the case story. And then they would go, "Oh, well, did you think about doing this?" Or then they would start asking questions. And I would go, "Oh, I need to go ask the client about that question." So I kind of created my own collaborative back then to make sure that I had thought about this. And I think you could probably do it with some attorneys, but I don't know. I think talking to another forensic accountant or fraud investigator or somebody with a lot of experience, that's just really helpful. So even if you work by yourself, I don't want you to think that you can't do this case planning process because I absolutely did.
Yeah, that's really cool. Use your network.
Exactly.